And also, Mike, we've been talking a lot about what's going to happen in this upcoming draft. We had Tony Pauline on today. He's a draft expert. He came on the show and was talking about all these different guys. And I think you mentioned to him about the wide receivers. And you said, is this a class of meh, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of when you read some of the breakdowns of wide receiver. It's just not, like last year you had the two tiers. You had the elite guys that all went boom, boom, boom. We went Drake London, and everybody went, the Jets got their guy, Eagles got, everybody went boom, boom, boom. And then there was the second tier of like Joe Pickens.
Yep.
And like, I always forget the kid Watson, the kid who went from North Dakota to Green Bay. Those are like the second tier wide receivers. Here you don't really even have like the first tier, that would be warranting a first-round pick. There's some speed burners. There's some guys that are quick, but there's really not that combination of size and athleticism that would make you say that guy's a top 15 pick.
All right, so here's the thing about where we're at currently, and this is why I think the Falcons did what they did in free agency. I don't know necessarily if you agree with it, but and we talked to Mac Hollins, by the way, who's a solid starter, but Drake London, wide receiver number 1. And then you say, okay, well, who's number 2? Well, right now you have to think that it's Mac Hollins, but we also signed Scotty Miller, who we also had on the show, guys, who brings some speed. He's a 4.3 guy. Listen, we've talked about Frank Darby, special teams guy, but he's had no impact here as a wide receiver since he's been on this roster. Jared Burkhardt. There's some other guys that are here.
Yeah, there was a fun story last camp. Was a lacrosse player turned football player, but he's a practice squad.
Didn't do anything. Like I need guys that produce. So at the end of the day, I'm going, Mike, where is wide receiver number 2? It is a question mark right now for this team. And then if you're telling me that this is a draft where, hey, if you're going to draft a wide receiver, you might want to wait till the 3rd or 4th round because there's no special talent at the top of this draft. Do we do that? Do you still address this if you feel like it's a need? And again, I'm just naming the guys that are here, but maybe Coach Art feels like Mac Hollins is going to be that wide receiver number 2. I don't know. I just look at this and go, I still feel like we could add to that position group.
Right. And by the way, for Ohio State fans, I'm not trying to crap on Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, he's a solid piece.
No. And I think Tony said that's his number 1 guy.
And that's his guy. And then the other guy was the one you mentioned from TCU. That's been like Quentin Johnson is the other guy, but they don't match up with Drake London was a guy that was kind of all world, and that's why we picked him where we did. But these guys certainly are, the guy that everybody's going to want is Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yes.
He'll be the first wide receiver off the board. That you saw the skills of what happened once he got knocked out of the semifinal.
Yeah, he's going to be a dog. There's no doubt. The other position group, it's Dukes and Bell at Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, and our Falcon Report guys. As always, talking about what's going on with our team this offseason, and it's been a busy offseason already. And I'm going to tell you more about what our general manager had to say about a couple of things. But left guard, Mike, Matt Hennessy's shown flashes. He's had potential, but unfortunately he was injured. And then you got Jalen Mayfield, who apparently is going to be ready for OTAs and, according to our general manager, Terry Fontenot, camp. And they still believe in him because they said he'll be ready to play both positions, whether it's guard or tackle. You also have Kyle Hinton that you've signed. My point is, who is going to Justin Schaefer? Who's going to step up at left guard?
It would be great if Schaefer takes that leap, but all of a sudden, I got to be honest, I thought Jalen Mayfield has kind of been he'll never start again. He's just reserve depth. But the idea that they're looking back at Jalen Mayfield and saying that apparently he's put some work in, you and I, it was funny because all last year or 2 years ago, John Chucker and I went round and round about Jalen Mayfield.
Yeah.
I mock drafted him where the Falcons took him, and I thought as a Michigan man, this guy could play some guard. And he was terrible. And it was a black hole. And it was just showing you how bad things were and how little dollars, Carl, we had that year because the one guy we signed as a free agent got hurt. We had nobody to play left guard in 21. And then last year it was slightly better. Elijah Wilkinson got hurt, and it was kind of a turnstile. So that's a concern for me. Who's playing left guard for this team? Because Elijah Wilkinson just signed with somebody else, by the way.
Mayfield started 16 games in 21. But didn't see the field last year because of injury. So if you just say, well, he was injured, and that's why the Falcons are, again, they're not giving up on him. I said this, you're not going to give up on a 3rd-round pick. You want to see him continue to develop, and maybe, Mike, they have more belief than we do when it comes to this position. But the fact that he was injured last year, you could easily say injury reserve. We know he didn't play a lot last year, but he's ready, and he's going to be healthy, and he's going to be in the mix. According to Terry Fontenot, that is how he's seeing Jalen Mayfield. I don't know about you guys, but those are 2 positions. I'm not saying we address them at 8, but those are 2 positions that you have to, once we get through this draft, we got to see maybe wide receiver being addressed and certainly another offensive lineman, specifically a left guard.
when you get into these mock drafts, and again, I know that it varies from website to website, so we all know that. But one of the things you do see is same thing. There's two, like everything else. There's two levels of offensive linemen, and there are some guys you recognize from Georgia. See, I love the idea of maybe trading down. If you get some more leverage and get up in the second round and pick. I don't know if you could pick up a second rounder, but you'd have to move down, and maybe you feel that's moving down too far in the first round. But then you could look at some of the linemen who you say, okay, there's value there. That makes sense. A guy we haven't talked about is Miles Murphy. What if Miles Murphy drops from Clemson? That's a solid defensive end piece. Is he spectacular? Paris Johnson from Ohio State. That's a guy that could play guard 1 year and then plug in at left, and then to be your heir apparent for Jake Matthews, or even kick Jake to guard.
Yeah. Do you think he's a first-round pick, though?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you,
I do too.
Yeah, Paris Johnson. But this goes back to
he's a huge man.
Broderick Jones. Would you like to trade down and take a stab at Broderick Jones from UGA?
Well,
that's another name for it. But again, those guys aren't top 8.
No. And Broderick, by the way, is going to be a guy. He's projected to go to the Jets because they keep talking about trying to protect whoever the quarterback's going to be, and they think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. That has kind of been the projections. Here's the thing about the Falcons. It's Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. All these moves we've made, and I think we've had a really good free agent period. I've said this time and time again. I think they spent the money the right way. They didn't necessarily overpay. But the biggest move this offseason, Mike, has been their commitment to Desmond Ridder. It's been the Falcons' commitment now to Desmond Ridder becoming quarterback number 1 after just 4 games, 4 auditions. And I don't care about all this other stuff, because if this don't work out, Calais Campbell and the Jesse Bates and all the things that we're excited about, it really won't matter, Mike, if you don't get the quarterback play that you need. All the things that have been done, the most important thing they did from a team and a franchise standpoint is say, this is our guy.
Got a bunch of guys hit us up yesterday on the text line. Didn't get a chance to answer all of them because it's too many. Thank you. But when you brought up the Bijan Robinson thing, guys like, well, we got Algier. And there's nothing wrong with Algier.
Yeah.
It was a 1,000-yard season in 16 games. But this is another level guy. If you could get to 10, or if you feel, look, if your guy's your guy, you just take him at 8. We talked about that with Tony Pauline. If you want to talk about taking a lot of pressure off of Desmond Ridder, because this guy is a next-level player. He's the burner. You talked about yesterday, the breakaway speed. Then you really are kind of setting your quarterback up for success. The way that Tannehill, had Derrick Henry to take some of the pressure off him in Tennessee and revitalize his career.
Correct. And here's the other thing. We have a head coach, if you guys haven't noticed, who likes to run the football. Now,
but again, you get the worst defense in the league, and you're going to go tight end, wide receiver, running back in your first 3 first-round picks. That's the only drawback. Someone say, what are you doing?
Well, it's not the positions. It's how these positions help you. Guys, if you have an offense that can control the clock, Mike, that you can run the ball that kind of way with Algier, and let's just say it's Bijan Robinson, okay? And now you're setting your quarterback up for more high-percentage passing plays because you're running the ball. You're controlling clock. You're taking pressure off of your defense.
Right.
Your defense is not on the field as much. So there's many ways to look at this when you say, all right, I don't like the positions they drafted, but how do those positions play out to help the team in overall winning? And that's the part where, Mike, they got to figure that out. Up there at Flowery Branch, is that their philosophy that they go, you know what? This helps us win, and this is how. Or we're just going to take the best player, and we'll figure it out. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because, and I think you and I talked about this, if you could go back in a time machine, not knowing, obviously, at the time that Todd Gurley was going to have arthritis in his knee, but you had 5 great years for the Rams, would you have taken –
Should have won the MVP, by the way.
Would you have taken Vic Beasley, knowing that you had a 1,000-yard rusher in Devontae Freeman, or would you have drafted – Todd Gurley with that pick in 2015.
So, see, this is the other part. When guys, I hear people say this, well, we've got that position already. Unless you're paying your quarterback $40 million, you're not drafting another quarterback, right? That's the one position. But, Mike, you can never have enough playmakers. Like, I don't care what team you're talking about. So, from that standpoint, when I hear people say, well, we got that guy already,
right.
You can't have enough of those guys. So that's kind of how I look at it, but we'll see where they go. It's going to be interesting. But Darian Fontenot talking about a couple of different things today, and one of those things that he's talked about was the investment in Jesse Bates, guys. The deal we paid him, 4 years, $64 million. It's $36 million guaranteed. And he says it starts with the makeup. He's been a productive player. So they're watching tape, Mike, and they're seeing him make all these plays in Cincinnati, and he's well-rounded, and he's tough, and he's smart. And then they say, and he makes everybody better. So how much better is the secondary going to be?
Right.
Because Terry Fontenot, and again, he comes from that. He was a secondary guy.
Right.
So, he's one of these, as he's watching this, saying, this is a difference maker, and I'm willing to go ahead and cut the check and make this guy a Falcon. And I'm glad they did. But the Falcons are expected to pick up A.J. Terrell's fifth-year option as well.
Ooh. See, now, A.J. Terrell, why was he having such a strange season last year?
I don't know.
Because, we talked about with Haywood, they brought in, it was Casey Haywood came in, played the other corner, and I don't know what happened. It was like the first game against the Saints. They kind of picked on Terrell down the field at the end of the game to get the win. It's just one of those, maybe just a strange season. Again, no pass rush. All the corners, all the guys in the secondary had to hold for 4 or 5 seconds. Either way, if you went and got one of the big elite corners this year in the draft, that's the safest play.
It is.
The safest play is to take, and we touched on this, you brought this up yesterday. Safest play out there is Christian Gonzalez. There's no risk involved with that. Everybody says he's the best corner. That's what Tony Pauline just said.
If it's a need and you're not taking a big risk, if in fact it was to fail, everybody would say he was the best guy. If you reach and you go get a guy that nobody's saying is the best guy at his position, right, and it fails, that's a bad pick, and now you're a bad general manager because you blew that. Right. So that's the way you have to look at it.
By the way, I know that pressure, it's all about how you handle pressure, and front office guys get it just like the players, because if you don't do your job, you're gone. How much pressure do you feel is coming down this year? 7-10, 7-10. Now, Falcon fans, some guys don't. I don't think there's pressure for Arthur. I think there's pressure for Fontenot, because I still think the first draft he did is still kind of a mixed bag. Second draft, we're still kind of chopping it up. I just don't know.
Did you think his hands, and I don't know, were his hands tied as to how they wanted to go? See, here's what I think, Mike, and I may be completely wrong. It's Dukes and Bell Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. When Matt was here that first year, what was the direction of the team? Where are we going?
Let's try to gimp out a playoff appearance in this last year of Matt Ryan.
So my point is, do you draft for that, or are you drafting for 3 or 4 years down the road? Right. I think now we're drafting differently, because the team has changed and we've gotten away from that situation. So I don't know. I just think that he came in and it was like, okay, we're trying to still win right now. Well, I need to pick guys that we need to try to do that with right now. We're not doing that right now.
If Kyle Pitts goes back to the Pro Bowl, and catches a Frisbee, whatever they do with the Pro Bowl these days. But if he's a 1,000-yard receiver.
And they also knew they were moving on from Julio, too.
Correct. Validation. Right. Because the thing is, and this is why when guys go, well, we should have drafted Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons went 8 spots behind. Now, if you redrew the draft from 21.
Everybody would have took him.
Right. But again, the quarterbacks all went, and then that crazy Trey Lance move. And then there was a run on wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell. So this is almost, I know we're picking at 8. You could argue maybe that was the year we should have traded down.
Yeah.
Unless Pitts does come back to being this elite player and this game changer we hope he's going to be.